Welcome to this 11th edition of ASU Cares Gather. I'm Sharee Hurts, and I'm proud to be guest hosting tonight's show. I will also be sharing the first story, a cultural story in line with tonight's theme, The Secret's Out. I can't wait to kick things off and hear from our other two guest storytellers tonight, Tanya Chakravarty and Kelly Clough. A little about me. I am a strategic partnership program manager with APS in their community affairs department. I've also worked in customer service, marketing, and communications for APS. In addition, I have spent 10 years in the healthcare industry on the Medicaid side, working in proposal development, organizational management, and project management. I am a double ASU alumni. I received my bachelor's in political science as well as my master's in law from ASU. Although I worked in the corporate setting for the last 20 years, 2 decades, I followed my passion of teaching, and I'm currently an adjunct faculty member in the Storytelling Institute for South Mountain Community College. I'm a native of the Bay Area of California, but I've called Phoenix my home for the last 20 years, where I live, currently raising my 2 wonderful children. So in life, it's one of my goals to teach through the clarity of my own example, to use my voice so others feel empowered to use theirs. And tonight, I hope to accomplish that goal. ASU Care was inspired to start the Gather series due to the overwhelming abundance of wonderful storytellers of every kind in Arizona. The ASU Care team believes everyone has stories to tell and has loved being able to share stories of our friends, neighbors in the Valley, and beyond. Gather storytellers of all skill levels, from first-timers to experienced veterans, have made Gather a compelling watch each and every month. We have an excellent set of all Arizona storytellers this month telling their The Secret's Out stories. And as always, ASU Care is so honored to be creating a space where their stories can be told. We will all share our stories and then move to our awesome Q&A featuring your questions. Our main ask, respectfully, is always keep the comments positive. We hope you're inspired to encourage our storytellers with words, hearts, applause, thoughtful questions, and more in the chat. We always love to hear from you. Once, there was a young girl named Suki, and she lived in a modest cabin by the sea with her ma and steppa. Every morning at day clean, Suki would get up and she would sweep the wooden floors of the cabin. She would go outside into the vegetable garden and tend to the weeds, pulling them out. And as the sun would rise in the sky, she would get hot. And sometimes if she slowed down or if she took too long, her mother's husband would start to fuss. Her mother called him Mr. Jones. But Suki, she had another name for this bossy, overseeing, lazy man. She called him Mr. Do-Nothing. One day, when Suki was out in the garden, and her chores were especially hard because it was very hot that day, when Mr. Do-Nothing wasn't looking, Suki slipped past him, out of sight, and she ran down in between the tall pines, down to her favorite secret hiding place along the beach. And she sat behind this big, beautiful rock that could keep her from being seen from behind. And Suki would sit down and she would lean against the big rock and she would dig her feet into the white sand, down deep to where her toes would begin to feel that damp, cool sand. And Suki put her head back on the big rock and she began to sing. Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And to Suki's surprise, a mermaid emerged from the water, her beautiful dark brown skin glistening in the sun, her hair long, black, thick, coily, and curly, all the way down to her small waist. You could see the scales, green and gold, glittering in the sunlight as her tail flicked in and out of the water. Hi, miss, said the mermaid. Suki looked. She said, you look awfully hot out there. Why don't you come in the water out here with me? It's nice and cool. Suki was a little hesitant. She had heard that sometimes a mermaid would try to grab you and pull you down beneath the water. And she said, no, miss, I can't swim. The mermaid said, well, I can teach you. Suki was a little cautious, but there was something about the mermaid's voice that was pleasant and reassuring. But as close as she got was wading along her feet in the water's edge. And she spent the day hanging out and talking and playing with the mermaid. And Suki looked up as the sun began to set and she realized, oh my, I have been out here for so long. I haven't had a chance to do any of my chores. When I get home, my mom and Mr. Do Nothing, they will scold me. The mermaid said, here, give this to your ma and your steppa when you go home, and they won't scold you. Suki took a look at what the mermaid had given her. She opened up her hand, and inside was a gold coin. She thanked the mermaid, and then she rushed on home. Sure enough, as soon as she entered into the cabin, her mom, Mr. Do Nothing, they started to scold her. They started to fuss. They started to yell. And Suki said, I did find this. And she opened up her hand. And her mom said, where did you find that? It was along the water's edge. Mr. Do Nothing grabbed it. The water's edge, huh? Well, why don't you go down there tomorrow and see if you can find some more? And she did. Every single morning, Suki would get up, she would rush down to her favorite hiding place, and she would get down to the water's edge and she would sing, thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And the mermaid would emerge, and her and Suki would spend time together in the water. And she kept her promise. She taught Suki how to swim. One day, the mermaid and Suki were in the water, enjoying the day. And Suki said, one day I'm going to leave this island and I'm going to go to the mainland. I'm going to leave this life of chores and hard labor. And I'm going to live in a palace that is beautiful everywhere I look. And I'm going to live in peace. And I'm going to be able to rest. And the mermaid said, my home is down deep below the water, far beyond the seawall, away from the land of men. You could come live with me. Suki thought about it, but then she realized she just missed her ma too much. Nah, I couldn't. And then the sun started to set, and as she always did, the mermaid pulled out a special gift for Suki, and she gave it to her. And Suki ran off home, thanking the mermaid. What she didn't know this day was behind that big rock was hiding her mom and Mr. Do Nothing. As soon as Suki was out of sight, her mom scurried to the water's edge and she sang, thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And the mermaid emerged from the water. And as she did, Mr. Do Nothing was in the water. He was in his canoe. He pulled out a net and he threw it trying to capture the mermaid. Angrily, she flipped her tail so that the canoe top-sided up, threw Mr. Jones into the water. Mr. Do Nothing goes flying, and the mermaid dives down deep into the ocean back to her home. Suki's mom, Mr. Do Nothing, mentioned nothing of this to her when they returned back to the cabin. And so in the morning, Suki gets up and she goes back down to her favorite hiding spot along the water's edge. And Suki begins to sing. Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. But nothing happens. The mermaid is gone and she doesn't come. Weeks and weeks go by and Suki doesn't see the mermaid and she grows oh so very sad. But without those gold coins, Mr. Do Nothing has piled on Suki's chores. So much hard labor that she begins very, very, very weak. One day, her mom, Mr. Do Nothing, leave the cabin for a while, and Suki manages to take her weak body outside of the cabin, down through the tall pines, to the beach, to her favorite hiding place along the water's edge. And then Suki calls out, she sings, Thee down below, come to me, Mama Joe. And as she does, to her relief and her surprise, the mermaid emerges from the water. And when she sees Suki, how weak she is, she rushes over to her, takes her beautiful magic locks, wraps her up, swaddles her in, and dives her down into the ocean, beyond the seawall, to her home, away from the land of men. When Suki wakes up, she's dry and warm, and she's in this place that is vast. And everywhere she looks, there is Mother of Pearl. And she says to her, this is my home. And you will not be scolded here or expected to do hard labor. Here, you can rest and be at peace. Thank you. That was my story. So the story that I told was based on a book that's called Suki and the Mermaid. But more specifically, the origins of this story, which is what connected me to it, are actually from a West African folktale. And I was intrigued because this story made its way all the way from West Africa through the Caribbean to the shores of South Carolina, which is where the story actually takes place. And this story has origins in West Africa, where the character in the story, Mama Joe, is actually a deity in West Africa and the Caribbean known as Mami Wata, who is a goddess. And reading this story is very unique because I could relate to Suki, as my grandparents are from the South. In this particular place in South Carolina, there's an island off the coast, a sea island actually, and the people there are descendants of enslaved, they're descendants of Africans that were enslaved people, and they used to work in plantations in the Carolinas and in Georgia and in Florida. But these people were able to maintain more traditional African practices and languages, and they have a very unique and rich culture. They even have a different dialect that they speak. It's similar to Creole, and it's called Geechee. And these people are called the Gullah people, and they have a slightly unique culture from those of the African Americans on the mainland. So those origins of the story I found fascinating, and how they evolved and emerged all the way through those lands, as many of my ancestors did. So that's my story with The Secret Is Out. And I'm excited to see what kinds of connections will be made in the traditional story that I told and the personal stories we'll hear tonight. Next up, we have Dr. Kelly Clough. Dr. Kelly Clough is a naturopathic physician, teacher, and Toastmaster. He has a small private practice in Tempe, Arizona, focusing on natural remedies and diet and lifestyle changes. He also teaches health science like anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and botanical medicine. To stay fit, Dr. Kelly enjoys hiking the mountains in the Phoenix area. He's an avid player and follower of chess, starting well before the Netflix hit show The Queen's Gambit came out. On Tuesday mornings, you can find him honing his public speaking skills at the Park Central Toastmasters. We welcome Dr. Kenny Clough. Dr. Kelly Clough.
I used to think my family was boring, but it turns out we just had a lot of good secrets. I was also born in the Bay Area, spent the first 10 years of my life there. And then our family moved to Long Island, New York. That's where my mom was from. That's where her family lives. So we saw them a lot growing up. Saw her family all the time. My dad's family, they lived in Wisconsin and LA. We visited them once or twice, but didn't see them for a long time. Now, at first, I didn't really think anything of it. They lived far away and it made sense. The other family was closer. But as time went on, I realized I hadn't seen them in years. I hadn't seen some of my cousins in 2 decades. I wasn't even sure if they talked to one another. Whenever I asked my dad if he had talked to his sisters or his brother, it was either he was meant to call them or he was waiting for a call back, but I wasn't sure how much they actually talked. And I wasn't really getting the answers that I wanted to my questions. Something was suspicious. Might have been a secret afoot. Plus, I just wanted to get to know my family better. So I decided to visit my aunt. My aunt, the oldest in the family, she would know the most. So we went to visit her, her 3 daughters, and my uncle being the youngest in the family. I arrived July 4th, Independence Day, 2017. And that night, I was at my aunt's assisted care facility, and we're outside in the warm summer night on lawn chairs, watching the fireworks with dozens of people around us watching the fireworks too. This was before COVID. And I could not believe, as she's telling me stories about her childhood and her life and growing up in the same household as my dad, I could not believe the stories I was hearing. As the fireworks exploded above us, she was dropping bombshell after bombshell. I'm talking about half sisters, secret pregnancies, a cousin I didn't know existed. It's like a Jerry Springer episode. It came out of absolutely nowhere. But I finally had proof that my family wasn't boring. We had some really interesting stories and some really interesting secrets. So, of course, I went back to visit shortly after. I came back for Thanksgiving to celebrate it with them. I wanted to hear more stories, maybe get some more juicy secrets. One of them, obviously, was what was going on between the family. How come people didn't talk a lot? My uncle was there, the youngest in the family. And so I asked him, what's going on between you and my dad? Is there like a feud between you two? Are you fighting? Because you haven't talked in years. And he goes, no. Okay. Do you want to talk to him? If you saw him and talked to him, would you want to? Would that be a good thing? Yeah. All right. I'm still confused at this point. If they're not fighting, why aren't they talking? Now, around this time, I was surprised that my dad actually called my aunt to wish her happy Thanksgiving. This is not something that happens every year. It surprised us. They talked on the phone for a few minutes and he told her that he wanted to come out and visit the next year for Thanksgiving. Now, normally, if my dad says he's going to visit next year for Thanksgiving, he means he's going to visit in 3 to 5 years. So I wasn't the only one who was shocked when that next year he came out. And it wasn't just him, it was his 2 sisters from Wisconsin. So all 5 siblings, the 3 sisters and the 2 brothers, were coming out to LA for a reunion. I was so excited. I was pretty sure it was going to go well. They're fun-loving people. But there's also a part of me that thought, now that they're all in the same place, I'm going to be able to ask them about some of these secrets. What's going on? How come you're not talking? Spill the beans. What's the beef here? Now, when we all got together, it was great. They got along perfectly. If there was an elephant in the room, I didn't notice it. They always wanted to hang out with each other. When we're getting done hanging out, they're making plans for the next day. It went swimmingly. And so at one point, it was me, my uncle, my dad talking, and I asked them, I said, so why aren't you talking? If you're not upset at each other, why aren't you talking? And my uncle, or maybe it was my dad, they're both so similar, it's semantics anyway. One of them says, Kelly, it's not that we're not talking, we just don't talk. And I don't know why it clicked then and not the other times. But for some reason, when he said it then, I finally got it. They weren't actively avoiding each other. It's just life had gotten in the way. They had their own lives and they weren't good at reaching out. I had anticipated some deep brewing secret, but the truth was boring. The secret was that there was no secret. And I actually preferred it this way. It was good that my dad didn't have some secret feud with his brothers and sisters. They love each other and they love spending time with each other. But life, as it has the tendency to do, can get in the way. Time can slip by. That's often what happens when we lose touch with people. But that time, they decided not to let life get in the way, not let time slip by. They had a loving reunion with each other and they rekindled relationships. Since then, they've been keeping in touch more. By no means a perfect family, but the communication channels are open. We didn't get to visit in person this past Thanksgiving because of COVID, but we did have a teleconference, and that was a first. Hopefully, they'll get to have another in-person reunion, but at the very least, they're talking more, and that's fantastic. Secrets, once revealed, can be exciting, or they might be mundane. They might be life-changing or boring. Sometimes secrets aren't secrets at all, but you'll never know until the secret's out. Thank you.
That was an inspiring story of rebuilding connections. So I have to ask you, Kelly, when you reached out and you were reaching out to your family members, you mentioned that you reached out to your aunt first to reconnect. What was her reaction? What was her reaction when you reached out to her?
She was excited. She was happy just to talk. I don't think she knew some of my intentions for it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was very open, very fun-loving family.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for that story. And our final storyteller tonight is Tanya Chakravarty. With over 30 years in the food and event industry, Tanya has worked in every position in a restaurant, including owner. And just to mix it up, Tanya incorporated her hospitality experience in event management. And by listening to clients and helping them choose the best menu and bringing the client's vision to life. With Local First Arizona, she thinks and works in all parts of the food system. So you can check out her recipes in the Good Food Finder. Career highlights for Tanya include designing and managing the 2013 Sacramento Kings rally with over 100,000 other Kings fans, owning and failing at owning the Sunshine and Spice food truck, creating over 400 events in 1 year at the Newton, and 1995 Fort Richardson Soldier of the Year. From all these ups and downs and paths of the food system, Tanya has collected many stories, and you can learn more at goodfoodfinderaz.com and find Tanya on Instagram at Girl Called Chuck. Love that. We welcome Tanya Chakravarty.
Thank you so much, Sharee. So the first time I brought meals to downtown Phoenix to serve the people living at homeless encampments, a fight broke out. The fight wasn't over the meals, but it was over food, specifically watermelon. And then the moment the knives were drawn, we scooped up our meals and we moved on. I'd picked up the meals from Chef Jennifer Johnson with Witnessing Nature and Food earlier that evening, and we had actually started at Margaret T. Hance Park. While we were walking through the park, I had an opportunity to meet new people, and the meal that night was grilled chicken pasta salad with Phoenix-grown veggies. There was an older gentleman I met. He was really skinny. He was wearing worn jeans, had a light t-shirt, ball cap, gray hair, gray beard. And it was a joy to watch him just sitting there quietly, enjoying the meal and the light breeze. And that's when the Phoenix Park Rangers pulled up and they kind of shooed us off. After we covered everyone at Margaret T. Hance, I loaded back up into my truck and we went downtown to an area that's known as the overflow lots next to the Andre House. This is where I witnessed the fight. We were passing out meals and a truck pulled up loaded with watermelons. They were passed around, but the last one had 4 hands on it, and that's how the argument began. It was the first week of August 2020. COVID numbers were blowing up. It was so horribly hot and dry and miserable. And watermelons would have been a prize to anyone who had to face a night of hot, sweaty life outside. The moment, it was super intense. The heat was intense, and I gotta admit, I was a little scared. I had been tasked by the city of Phoenix with my colleague Melissa to start and manage the Feed Phoenix program. The plan was to use CARES funding to buy produce from Phoenix farms, which then went on to Phoenix small restaurants who would be reimbursed to make the meals. Then the meals would be delivered to Phoenix community centers and nonprofit organizations to be distributed to Phoenicians impacted by COVID. It was my task to find the community centers and the nonprofit organizations. And I thought this would be so easy, no problem. That's what I said. It was not. It was so hard to explain how free meals would just magically show up on any given Tuesday. And it could be as many meals as they maybe would want. Not only that, a lot of the community centers were closed because of COVID, or they had limited the amount of people that could be there, or they didn't have any volunteers, or they were worried about food service or people hanging out. So it was by chance that Eric Brinkley called me, and all he wanted to do was to feed his neighbors in Phoenix that might not have a house. Volunteers would need to pick up the meals and bring them to the streets. So we worked together to get meals to downtown Phoenix. And I decided I'd be one of those volunteers. We started with 150 meals. It would take hours and multiple locations to hand out meals. People didn't trust us, often thought we had like an ulterior motivation. And I would be a little bit protective of those meals. Sorry, no, I can only give you 1 meal. What do you mean your girlfriend's right around the corner? Tell her to come on by. I can give her a meal too. It took months. We would show up week after week. We would get shooed away from park rangers, police, security. We would shift from corner to corner, trying to reach people. It would get sweaty. It would be hot. And finally, one night I pulled up. I had barbecue pulled pork wraps from Chef Beckett. The scent in my truck, the flavors, oh, it was amazing. And I realized as I'm pulling up, the secret is out. There were lines of people along 9th Avenue next to the tents of people waiting for these meals. That night, we passed out 150 wraps in less than 40 minutes. And I called up Beckett and I asked him, next round, can you do 200? This last week, I picked up meals from Chef Michelle Daniels. She is a powerful Black chef and very passionate about serving veterans, and she's so kind. She's inside of an American Legion hall, and she's making the most amazing, delicious meals I've ever smelled. She packs my truck with 200 meals, some apple juice, loads of snacks. They might be borderline expired, but between the juices, the meals, the snacks were wiped out in an hour. Now, when someone asks me for the more than 1 meal, my answer is always, of course. I don't know. It's not for me to judge. I've learned so much about people being hungry and people just wanting something delicious to eat, especially something warm. And the beauty of like a warm meal is a prize that everyone deserves to win. The Feed Phoenix program so far has given away over 70,000 meals. We started that first week of August. We're still doing meals today. We've supported 45 Phoenix restaurants and 16 Phoenix farms. Sometimes a good meal is the best secret ever.
Wow. Thank you for your beautiful story, Tanya. You know, the first thing that comes to my mind I have to ask you is, what was it that allowed you to go from that scarcity mindset in the beginning when you were protective over the meals to that abundance mindset where please take more? What was it that created that shift for you?
It was an interesting moment of letting go, realizing that it wasn't mine. It's not the meals were not for me. The meals were for people that were hungry, for my neighbors, for my friends, new people that I've met. It was for them. And it's theirs.
Well, I appreciate that answer and appreciate your story. And now we're moving into my second favorite part of the evening, and that is where we're excited to move into the Q&A part of the show. And we're going to start with a few questions that have been sent to us from ASU Care for all of us to answer. So for both for Kelly and Tanya, both of you, we can always all answer and weigh in on these questions. And if there's anyone watching and you have a specific question for Kelly or for Tanya or for myself, please drop those questions into the chat. Don't be shy. We love this discussion. The interaction portion of it would be great. So before we get started with those, one of the first questions is, what is your experience with storytelling? So Kelly, I'm going to start with you.
Limited. I've never considered myself a storyteller or a good storyteller, but I do see the value and power in stories. Stories move people, they impact people. Now, a lot of my stories these days are more health and medical related, so this was a new challenge for me, but it is something that I've been working on at Toastmasters, and this seemed to be a good opportunity to practice some storytelling skills.
Well, I can definitely relate myself. My experience with storytelling is an evolution. My brother he started taking a storytelling class years ago and took me to a storytelling event. I started going to events after that. I started hanging out with storytellers. I started taking storytelling classes, and now I am teaching one. And I love being part of the storytelling community and connecting with all of the different people. Tanya, what about you?
Oh, Sharee, I just want to tell you, I loved that story that you told.
Thank you.
It was so fascinating. Thank you so much. And it sounds like you got the storytelling bug too, right?
Yeah.
So I was producing a storytelling show with Dan Hull. And so I have done a couple of stories, the Storyline Slam, where I've gotten on stage and gotten good reviews and bad reviews and all of the above. And I've also told the story with the Arizona Republic, the Storytellers show. So I guess I started a few years ago, and it's just been really a great time. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, we do have a question that I want to pull up from Tracy in the chat. Thanks so much, Tracy, for this question. She has asked, what is your favorite theme or metaphor within your story? She's asking this question to me. My favorite theme or metaphor within the story, it would probably have to be the metaphor. The metaphor where Mama Jo comes and Suki's calling out, and she doesn't necessarily know the first time that she's calling out to anyone in particular, but the mermaid answers her call. And that's very indicative of who Mama Jo's character represents. She represents this goddess, Mami Wata or Yemiya, where she's the goddess of the ocean and she's a protector. And so she's coming in to protect Suki, even though Suki doesn't know that she's calling out to her. So that metaphor and that connection between the physical and the spiritual is something that really spoke to me in the story. I was gifted the book from a friend of mine, from a loved one, and that just really spoke to me in the story itself. Was that relationship between the two of them, and that relationship between spirit and physical. So that's, hopefully that answers your question, Tracy. And how does it relate to my life? So hopefully I answered that question as well. The next question was to you, Tanya, and that was, how can we help feed Phoenix?
That is a really great question. So the program it looks like it is wrapping up currently, but the City of Phoenix is considering whether or not they want to continue. We do have information on the goodfoodfinderaz.com about bits and pieces of this program. Just, I think, recognizing that the City of Phoenix really had the guts to give a crazy new program a go. Just thanking our city council members and recognizing that they actually trusted someone like me to make sure that meals would get out. And I'm very grateful that the City of Phoenix did that. So just letting your city council member know that they're working really hard on behalf of all Phoenicians, and you appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. There was another question, and this one is for you, Kelly. And this one is, so your story talked about connections being broken due to family members just not talking to one another or not being good at it. Do you have suggestions for people who may find themselves in similar situations and trying to draw out of that that habit the way your family members did?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times it seems like the greatest effects or benefits happen as a side effect rather than a direct effect. So for years, I had been asking questions and wondering, what's going on, and visit and this and that, and didn't really get the progress that I was looking for. And eventually I was like, you know what, I don't, it's not my life. Like my life, I want to hang out with them. What they do between themselves is up to them. So I just decided I'm just going to go there and hang out and don't really, not concerned about what happens after that. And that's exactly when all of a sudden everyone started connecting. So I think to some degree of just leading by example, perhaps, and just being like, oh, I'm going to go out to LA then. And if you want to join me, you can. And then the next thing I know, people are hanging out. So sometimes making that first move, making the first call, going out to visit and being the first one to do it, sometimes that gets the ball rolling. And that's what happened in my case.
Thank you so much for that. We have another question in the chat from Colleen, and Colleen wants to know, what and who are the inspirations each of you use as storytellers? Wow, that's such a great question. And Colleen, I'll tell you who, in terms of inspirations for me, are some of the faculty members at the Storytelling Institute are some of the most phenomenal storytellers. And some of the people in those classes have taught some of the most amazing stories. One in particular, of course, is Liz Warren. And if you have not heard a story from Liz Warren, you really need to. And also Marilyn Torres, you need to hear a story from her, as well as by Travis May. The three of them kind of got the little bug for me, as well as Reverend Sylvia Torre. All of them really inspired me because they all were so different, very, very different in their styles, but very much themselves. And that's what inspired me from them, is that they just kind of bring themselves to the story. And that was what inspired me. Tanya, what about you?
Oh, you know what? I got to second you on Liz Warren. I heard her tell a story once about her grandmother coming through Arizona on a train. And I was like, whoa, she's got a beautiful, laid back, comfortable style about her that is so different than my own. Obviously, I'm high energy, and and she's just relaxed, but she has the coolest style and the coolest stories. And of course, I definitely love stories from Dan Hull with Storyline Slam. His style is, um, he's like, he's so funny. He's just funny, and he has fantastic stories. He's lived a rich life.
Kelly, what about you?
I feel like I should say Liz Warren, but unfortunately, I don't know her, so I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to do some research. I am always inspired when people tell good stories. I was inspired by the stories today. I always learn a little bit more about what makes a good story and different styles of storytelling. I think that's one of the benefits of hearing different people talk, is to hear different styles. Maybe you don't replicate it, may not be your style, but it's still good to see that type of variety. So my Toastmasters, Park Central, a lot of great speakers and storytellers there. I've learned so much. But what started it, believe it or not, is actually I took a class on Shakespeare. I was all into math and economics, and I just had some extra credits to spend. And so I took a class on Shakespeare, and I was blown away by his use of language. And that got me thinking more about stories and stuff in general. I had never expected that type of emotional connection to writing.
I appreciate that, and that resonates with me as well. Colleen, thank you so much for asking that question, which also leads to another question in the chat from May Ann. And she asked, how can I take storytelling classes? Well, you can definitely take storytelling classes from the Storytelling Institute at South Mountain Community College. I believe registration is open for summer or fall. If it hasn't already, it will be soon. And Tanya, you mentioned, does Dan do classes as well for Story Slam? Does he do classes?
We're on a bit of a pause. We definitely realized that a slam is incredibly difficult without an audience. So it's all about that audience reaction to if you're telling a good story or if you're telling a bad story. So we're on a bit of a pause, but you can definitely find more information on Storyline Slam, especially on Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving that shout out, and thank you, Mian, for asking that question. We also have another question for you, Kelly, and this one is from Jackie, or Jackie. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but she asked, "What do you love most about naturopathic medicine?"
Yeah, that's a good question. So for people that don't know, naturopathic medicine, it's the bridge between the conventional and the holistic. So we learn the basic, the standard medicine, but then we also learn diet and exercise and acupuncture and stuff like that. To me, the what I like the most is the empowering others, teaching people how to eat properly, how to move their body properly. Some people know what works for them, but a lot of people don't know. And that information can make a world of difference, and it can save them from going to doctor's office visits, can save them from coming to see me, which I'm fine with. I love to provide people with tools that help them live a healthier life, and where that they can be actually empowered to utilize those tools themselves rather than being dependent on someone else.
Another follow-up question that Tracy asked for you, Kelly, was what led you to, and she also kind of asked that same question about what inspired you to go into that field of medicine, but what led you to Toastmasters?
I wasn't led to Toastmasters as much as I was dragged to Toastmasters. So myself, like others at that group, were roped in by one Wyatt Earp. He's very persistent and he's very good at it. He's a good Toastmaster. He's good at bringing people in. So I had given a speech that he had seen, and he told me, I think you have potential, and I know a group of people that could help you, reach your goals. And after he called me like 15 times more every week, I started going, and then I couldn't stop. It was really good.
I can relate. I too. Yeah, I can relate. I was once coerced into joining Toastmasters from a very charismatic and well-spoken gentleman who encouraged a lot of my fellow colleagues and peers to join. And I was a member of Toastmasters for a lot of years, and I probably could use a fresh up. But we do have another question, and that is from Michael. And Michael wants to know, what is the personal reward you gain through your storytelling or surprises? Michael, what a great question. So I'll start. One of the personal rewards that I've gained through storytelling was that I'm a very private person, and I don't like to share a lot about myself. I took a personal story class as a way to challenge myself, because I wanted to be able to tell my own story, and I wanted to be able to do it in my own voice. And so I didn't think I had as many stories as all the storytellers that I had met at that time. And taking that class really helped me to find my own voice, to be able to share my own story. And it gave me not just a power to it, but a fondness for it. And I realized that if you ask me what type of traditional storyteller, I'll tell you, I'll say personal storytelling is definitely my favorite. So that was a surprise for me, but also what was a personal reward is that I can now tell my personal story. 3 years ago, this whole thing would have terrified me. So that I can do this, storytelling helped me to be able to do that. Tanya, what about you?
So the reward is the community of storytellers by far. I mean, just knowing that you're not alone in being terrified to tell something personal about yourself, or knowing that that you're not alone also in, a lot of times stories are an admission of something off, right? Like a weird thing or a quirk, or and so being able to like admit some of those things in public is a pretty great reward in the community, like talking to other people that also feel that way, and hearing other people's stories. I really feel as though I can develop a great connection just by listening to somebody's story and having some compassion for, weird situation that they've been in.
That's great. What about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both of you said. I also did not consider myself a storyteller. Still don't really think I do, but this was a good practice to. I think it's always good when you can speak your truth and say it in a way that where your personality comes through as well. So it's always good to practice that. But I also agree with Tanya that the connection, I think, is probably the biggest reward. Stories have a way of moving people. I never understood it. I'm not sure if I fully understand it still, but it works, it happens. And so it's nice to be able to connect with people that way. Sometimes, like I learned a little bit more about the situation that I talked about through creating the story. It gave me a way to look at it and dive into it. And then sometimes maybe there was someone who had to hear that message for whatever reason, and it might have impacted them because stories have that potential. So I always like connecting with people, and if it means something to someone or helps them get a good perspective on what's going on in their life, I think that would be maybe the best benefit I could get.
Well, I appreciate that response. And actually, Christian had asked a question in the chat, and he was probably just connecting with you in your response. I'm going to read the question to see if you want to add anything additional, because this is for you, Kelly. And he said, what do you think the greatest barrier to connection was before you began reconnecting to family? Talking about connection, he says, was it like geography? Was it energy? Was it interest? What do you think was the biggest barrier?
I think it was a lot of things. It was a lot of just humans like to take the path of least resistance. We're wired to do that. And if you let that happen, then that's what happens. But I think it was a combination of geography. They're not good at texting, the autocorrect is absurd. It's hard to even read the text. But also life got in the way. And I think it was just part of inertia too, where they were just kind of in that habit. And I don't exactly know what it was, and I don't even think they realized it, because sometimes when you're in it, you don't even see where you're at. You don't see it for what it is until you step outside of it, and then you have better perspective. So I'm not sure really what it was, but for whatever reason, me going there shook things up, and That's all I really care about at this point. But yeah, I'm curious it is interesting how sometimes things fall away. But yeah, thankfully they still had that love. And I think love and communication, just bridging that gap is all that was needed to pull everyone together.
Thank you so much for that. There was another question that ASU Care asked that I want to circle back to. And this question was for each of us. And it was, once you found out that the theme of tonight was going to be the secrets out, was it easy for you to zero in on your story that you wanted to tell? Did that kind of come to you pretty quickly? What about you, Tanya?
Well, not so much because I really don't want to admit to some of my secrets that are super deep and dark or weird or whatever. But I turned to my friends and colleagues and said, okay, this is the topic. What do you know about me that I might not even know about myself? And they said, well, because they said, well, right now you're working so hard on this project, and they said you just kind of light up whenever you talk about it because it's so exciting to me. So it was tricky, but luckily my friends know more about me than I do, I think.
What about you, Kelly?
I had no idea. Actually, it's a bit of a backstory. So I was going to do this last month, but I double booked myself, so I couldn't join. I didn't know what I was going to say about that anyway. And then for this one, I thought, okay, I can think of something, and came up with a great story. I thought it was great, and it flowed so well. I mean, I don't write stories too quickly, but this came pretty well. But then it turns out I had not followed the rules. I didn't read the rules, and it was supposed to be about me, and I wrote it about someone else. So I had to rewrite it. And I thought, wow, this was a good story, and I was already late with it, and so now I got to rewrite it. So no, it was actually very difficult to write the story. But I basically wrote the story about the story, was kind of how I tweaked it. But I think I gave everyone at ASU Care a heart attack by getting it in really late. So thanks again for your patience.
Mine was kind of an interesting backstory too. I had no idea that this theme was the secrets out until after I had already agreed to tell, and I had already agreed to tell the story that I was telling tonight. So when I found out the theme, I was like, well, I don't really understand how that relates to my story. And I'm thinking, oh, the secret's out about the oh, okay, I get it now, about the mermaid. I'm thinking, now, how is that going to relate to the rest of everybody else's story? So I wasn't so much hard for me to figure it out. I was trying to figure the connection. And it's funny, each of us have a Bay Area connection, which I also thought that secret was out too. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, so we each came to it in our own way. I love the way that you went to your community on this one, Tanya, to get some input. So Colleen is asking a really great question. She says, what advice would you give to very young storytellers? And as a person who is an adjunct faculty member teaching young storytellers, my students are in high school taking early college classes, is get started. Get started now. Don't overthink it. And two, anyone and everyone is and can be a storyteller. So don't overthink what you think that label title means. Anybody can and everybody can, and we all do in ways in any way, shape, or form you haven't even thought of. So, find a class, definitely join us at South Mountain Community College, but just start, and anybody and everybody is and can be a storyteller. What about you, Tanya?
I say read. I read a lot as well. I read so much, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like reading helps me formulate understanding what an outcome might be, like what's the beginning, middle, and end sort of portion of it. So I say reading, but then the other part of it is holding court. One of the things that I've really learned that is kind of deeply saddening is that part of the reason why people tend to become homeless is because they don't really have a tribe. They don't really have a group of people that they can rely on, or that they've told stories to, or that they've trusted. And they're often very isolated. And so by telling stories, even as a young person or as an adult or as an older person, you're opening yourself up to a community that, if nothing else, will help you not become homeless. So um, it really creates humanity and community, and gives you a chance to connect with other people. And so I say two things: read, and then tell stories to people that you care about or think maybe are kind of cool.
Excellent. Excellent. What about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I think you both gave really great tips. Just to, I guess, piggyback a little bit, that, yeah, number one, just practice, tell the stories, but also I like the idea of reading. I pay attention to stories that I like. I think Malcolm Gladwell is a great storyteller. I love the way he makes his way to the ending, and it's always a surprise for me. So I pay attention to things that he does, and try, to emulate it sometimes. But also, I think it's also, if you want to get good at something, it's good. I think it's important to be okay with being bad at it at first. So I think I'm a better storyteller than I used to be. I'm not to the level that I would like to be, but the only reason why I get better, if I get better, it's because I practice, and I'm okay with it not being as good as I want it to be. So I think if you want to get into storytelling and you stick with it, then yeah, you'll be a good storyteller. You got time on your side.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Christian's asking a question that's kind of along those lines. I think you probably even answered the question, Kelly. He said that he liked it. It was mentioned habit, and that following that, for all the storytellers, are you habituated to sharing stories? Do you find it easy and natural, or frequently difficult? For me, it's kind of like, once I started telling stories, it was no stop. There was no stopping it. And I'm always, even now, I was listening to a panel discussion of two authors, to Tanya's point, about these two books that didn't seem related, but through panel discussion that we found connection. And as they were talking, different thoughts were coming to me, and I was like, oh, that would be a great story. Oh, wow, that would be a great story. And you listen differently. And then you have opportunities to create stories out of these things. And those are the things that you're finding connections with other people. So for me, it becomes easier. And I actually prefer to just keep telling stories. When I stop telling stories for a long period of time, then, it's kind of like you're just out of rhythm, out of practice, kind of like you would be with an instrument. At least that's how it is for me. Either of you want to add anything on that? I think we're kind of all sharing the same situations.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Thank you. It can be habitual, and that if it is easy to remember to get back on, but it takes a little bit, being a little, we haven't done a slam in a while, so I was a little rusty coming in. So I needed some extra practice for sure.
Yeah, use it or lose it, right?
Yeah.
That's the principle.
Definitely use it or lose it. There was another question asked. So I'll ask both of you this question. So is this the first time that you've been telling a story, like through live stream, through Zoom or YouTube or anything like that, where it's virtual and not to a live audience? Is this the first time that either one of you is telling a remote story?
No, not for me. I actually just recently, a few weeks ago, did a Toastmasters speech competition, a humorous speech competition. There's no better place for that than Zoom, where you're telling jokes and it's just silence around you. It's tough. It's one of the best things about Toastmasters is usually a good crowd. So you tell jokes, you tell stories, people are into it, they're smiling, they're laughing, you get that positive feedback, you're in that energy, it feels amazing. There's nothing better when you're giving a humorous speech to give a joke and hear the roars of laughter around you. And when it's just the random house settling noises, it's not the same thing. But it's, it's what we have right now, so it's better than nothing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was first time I've done storytelling. And the challenge for me, virtually, the challenge for me was that not just like not having audience reaction, but I'm on Zoom and Google Meetings all day, meeting with people and phone calls. And so it's hard to switch from meeting agenda to storytelling. And so this was fun. And I really am so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. We have time for one last question. And so I get to pick because I'm the host. So this is the one question that I've been asked before, and I'm going to tailor it a little bit to you guys. Now that we're in this virtual environment, what is one thing that you like about this virtual environment that you would keep, and what is one thing that you would not do? So now that we're in a virtual environment, anything that you picked up, we call them COVID keepers, that there's things that we've kind of been able to acquire in this remote space that have actually been beneficial, and then some things that we just not so much. What about you? What about you, Kelly?
Well, I do think that the connectivity is great, and being able to, like, we have meetings where we have people from across the country, from other countries. It's not possible for in-person meetings. So that reach is expanded. And I think that's fantastic. With that reach, you reach farther, but is the connection as deep? I think that's the main question. It's different. It's better than nothing, but it is different when I like to make eye contact. But when I'm making eye contact at Zoom, I'm just looking down at my computer, and to make eye contact, I have to look at the camera, which is strange. So the connecting with other people it's more difficult on some levels. You don't get the same depth perhaps, but it does allow for more reach, and especially during this time. So I hope we keep up the virtual meetings. It's, my dry cleaning bill is down tremendously from Zoom and not having to leave my house. So that's good. There's some positive things, but I do think finding ways to make sure the connections are deep, that would be the thing that I would say really need to find that.
What about you, Tanya? What are you keeping?
Gosh, I really, really, really hope that we keep our sense of community. We've definitely needed, especially as someone who is constantly involved in the food industry, and I am constantly studying restaurant trends, what's working, what's not working. What's working is when neighbors come together to support a restaurant, however that might be. And what's not working is when we forget that the sense of community, how important it is, and how important it is that our community comes together to keep what's important to us. And so I really, really hope that neighbors, whatever you want to call it, neighbors, community, looking out for each other, that continues. I really do.
I love what both of you said, and I just want to add one thing to it, which is in line with it. And for me, I think that you just have to be a lot more intentional. You have to be a lot more intentional about maintaining connection, about connecting with those people through Zoom that are all over the country. I had an amazing Thanksgiving with family members that would have cost us a fortune for us all to be in one room because we were in different states. But being intentional about those conversations and those connections, I think, is something that we should keep, and I hope to see more of. So with that, I will close this out and just say thank you so much for spending an hour with the Arizona Storytellers tonight. It has been a pleasure being your host, your guest host, and sharing stories with you. And we give much gratitude to Kelly Clough and to Tanya Chakravarty and to every one of you who are listening for sending in comments in the chat and for asking questions tonight. We really appreciate it. ASU Cares' next live stream will be the Return of the Beans live music series on Thursday, March 11th at 7 p.m. Phoenix-based Costa Rican Latin folk songstress and accordionista Tatiana Crepso is fresh from a visit to her homeland and will be taking over the Beam stream with her original work and brand new songs inspired by her travels. Our next monthly Gather event will be Wednesday, March 31st at 6:30 p.m., and it's going to be a good one. The theme is Don't Panic. The guest host and cultural storyteller will be none other than Liz Warren of the South Mountain Storytelling Institute. Watch all of these live stream events just as you're watching now on ASU Cares YouTube, Facebook Live, or Twitch. We recommend that you subscribe to ASU Care's YouTube channel so you'll never miss a show. ASU Care is a self-sustaining venue that has been presenting live stream programming since April, creating paid gigs for Arizona artists during a time when we all need the joy and wonder of music and the arts more than ever. The venue receives no funding from the state or university and needs your help. We hope you'll stop by asucare.com, which is spelled ASUKERR.com, on your way off your device tonight and click the gold Give Now button to donate any amount you are able to. You will be helping sustain the arts, artists, and the beautiful historic ASU Care Cultural Center. Thanks again for watching, and good night.